We begin in the opening lines of Exodus, a story that starts not with triumph, but with silence and shadows. As we enter chapter 1, the glory of Joseph saving Egypt is long gone, replaced by a grim reality for Abraham's descendants. The text tells us a new Pharaoh rises to power, a king who knows nothing of Joseph or the history of the Israelites. He looks at the growing Hebrew population and sees a massive threat. Fear grips the Egyptian empire. To neutralize this, the Pharaoh forces the Israelites into brutal slave labor. The narrative paints a dark picture. The Egyptians make their lives bitter with harsh work in brick mortar and the fields. Yet a profound irony emerges. The more they are oppressed, the more they multiply. Frustrated Pharaoh issues a chilling decree. He commands the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill every newborn Hebrew boy right at the delivery stool, but save the girls. This brutal order was not just about control, but a direct attack on God's covenant people. Eliminating the males would force the survivors to marry into the dominant culture, effectively erasing the Israelites as a nation and stopping the promise made to Abraham. But the midwives fear God more than the king. They defy his order, letting the boys live. Enraged Pharaoh expands the death sentence, ordering every Hebrew boy thrown into the Nile. Amid this state-sponsored terror, as we move into chapter 2, a desperate mother from the tribe of Levi gives birth to a son. Seeing he is a fine child, she hides him for 3 months. When she can no longer hide him, she makes a heartbreaking choice. She takes a papyrus basket, waterproofs it with tar, places her baby inside, and sets it among the reeds of the Nile. The very river, meant to be a grave, becomes the vehicle for his salvation. As the story unfolds, Pharaoh's own daughter comes to bathe. She spots the basket, opens it, and hears the baby crying. Recognizing he is a Hebrew child, she feels pity. In a brilliant twist, the baby's sister Miriam, who was watching from afar, steps forward and offers to find a Hebrew nurse for the child. The princess agrees, and the baby is handed back to his own mother, who is paid by the royal house to raise him. As he grows, he returns to the daughter of Pharaoh, who adopts him and names him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. This ironic twist shows God working silently but powerfully. Without a miracle from the sky, the future deliverer of Israel is rescued and funded by the very royal household that ordered his death, giving him the insider knowledge he will eventually need. The years pass, and Moses grows into a man living between two worlds. One day, he visits his people and watches their forced labor. A flashpoint occurs when Moses sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. In a burst of anger and a misguided attempt at justice, Moses kills the Egyptian and buries him in the sand. But the secret does not stay hidden. The next day, he realizes his crime is known, and soon the news reaches Pharaoh. He seeks to kill Moses, forcing the prince of Egypt to flee. Moses escapes across the wilderness to Midian. Exhausted and far from power, he sits by a well. He defends a group of shepherdesses from hostile men, leading him into the home of their father, a priest named Jethro. Moses stays, marries Jethro's daughter Zipporah, and settles into an obscure life as a shepherd. He remains in the wilderness for a long time. Meanwhile, the king of Egypt dies, but the slavery of the Israelites only intensifies. The chapter ends with a shifting rhythm. The Israelites groan and cry out, and their plea goes up to God. The text says God hears their groaning, remembers his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and takes notice of them. The silence is about to break. After decades, the scene shifts from the brickyards of Egypt to the isolation of the desert. As we enter chapter 3 of Exodus, Moses is no longer a prince. He is just a shepherd tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. He leads the sheep to the far side of the wilderness, near Horeb, the mountain of God. Suddenly Moses sees an impossible sight. An angel of the Lord appears to him in flames from within a bush. Moses sees the bush engulfed in fire, yet it does not burn up. Curiosity draws him closer. God calls him from the bush by name, warning him to stay back and remove his sandals, for he is standing on holy ground. God introduces himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Terrified by the presence, Moses hides his face. The narrative takes a personal turn. God declares he has seen the misery of his people, heard their cries, and knows their suffering. He announces his intention to come down and rescue them, leading them out of that country into a land flowing with milk and honey. But then comes the shock for Moses. God says, "I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt." Moses, now an 80-year-old fugitive, recoils. He raises his first objection. "Who am I to approach Pharaoh?" God simply answers, "I will be with you." But Moses pushes back again. He asks what he should tell the Israelites when they demand to know who sent him. God responds, revealing his name. "I am who I am. Tell the people that I am has sent you." It is a profound moment. The name Yahweh, from the Hebrew for to be, shows that God is self-existent and eternal. He is independent of all creation. This sets him apart from the nature-bound gods of Egypt. He is the absolute reality who acts in human history. By chapter 4, Moses is still resisting. He voices a third fear. What if they do not believe me or listen to my words? God equips him with 3 signs of authority. He turns a wooden staff into a living snake and back again. He makes his hand leprous, then heals it, and turns Nile water into blood once poured on dry ground. Yet Moses offers a 4th excuse. He claims he is slow of speech. God reminds him who created the human mouth, but Moses breaks down, begging God to send someone else. The text notes the Lord burned with anger, though he accommodates his servant. God appoints Aaron the Levite to serve as the voice for Moses. Moses will be like God to Aaron, and Aaron will be his prophet. With this final concession, Moses accepts. He asks Jethro for permission to leave, packs his wife and sons, and begins the trek back to Egypt with the staff of God in his hand. Then, a startling event occurs. At a lodging, the Lord meets Moses and is about to kill him. Zipporah grabs a flint knife, circumcises her son, and touches Moses' feet, calling him a bridegroom of blood. The Lord lets him be. This terrifying event shows the absolute holiness of God. Moses was leading the covenant people to freedom, yet he had ignored the basic sign of circumcision in his own home. This harsh encounter teaches the audience that the deliverer must obey God before he can demand that Pharaoh do the same. Past this crisis, the chapter ends with hope. Aaron meets Moses in the wilderness, just as God directed. The brothers return to Egypt and gather the Israelite elders. Aaron repeats everything the Lord had told Moses and performs the signs. Hearing that the Lord saw their misery, the Israelites believe. They bow and worship, setting the stage for the coming clash. With the elders behind them, the brothers enter the heart of Egyptian power. In chapter 5 of Exodus, Moses and Aaron stand before Pharaoh with a demand from Yahweh. "Let my people go, so they may hold a festival in the wilderness." Pharaoh shows pure contempt. "Who is the Lord that I should obey him? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." To punish this perceived rebellion, Pharaoh cruelly increases the burden on the Hebrew slaves. They must now gather their own straw too, make bricks, yet meet the same daily quota. The Egyptian foreman beat the Israelite leaders for failing this impossible task, and the desperate men turn their anger on Moses. The hope of the people collapses, and a frustrated Moses cries out, questioning why he was sent at all, since his arrival only brought more misery to his own kin. God renews his promise, assuring Moses that Pharaoh will eventually be forced to drive the Israelites out himself. In chapter 7, the battle begins. This is not just diplomacy. It is a cosmic war against the false gods of Egypt. Moses and Aaron return to court. Aaron throws down his staff, and it becomes a living serpent. Though Egyptian magicians copy the trick, Aaron's staff swallows theirs, warning them of Yahweh's total supremacy. Yet Pharaoh refuses to budge. A systematic dismantling of the Egyptian empire and its spiritual foundation begins. The Lord tells Moses to strike the Nile. That divine source of life turns into blood, killing the fish and ruining the water supply. It is a direct attack. Next, a swarm of frogs covers the land, filling bedrooms and ovens, mocking the Egyptian goddess of fertility, who was depicted as a frog. When the frogs rot, gnats rise from the dust. Here, for the first time, the magicians are powerless. They tell their king, "This is the finger of God." Still, Pharaoh remains stubborn. Throughout this ruin, the text notes that Pharaoh hardens his heart, but also that God hardens it. This is crucial. God does not force an innocent man to do evil. Instead, Pharaoh first chooses to resist pridefully. In response, God strengthens him in his own rebellious resolve. The king's arrogance became the tool for divine justice, displaying absolute power across Egypt and Israel. Judgment rained down throughout chapters 8, 9, and 10. Swarms of flies ruined the land. Yet God made a clear, miraculous distinction. He completely shielded Goshen, where the Israelites lived, proving he controlled where the plagues fell. Then disease struck the Egyptian livestock. Painful, festering boils broke out on both the Egyptians and their animals. Still, the king would not yield. The Lord sent the worst hail in history, battering the nation and killing all caught in the open, proving Yahweh controlled the skies. A devastating swarm of locusts followed, devouring every bit of greenery the hail had left behind. Finally, a thick, suffocating darkness smothered the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. This was a humiliating defeat for Ra, the supreme sun god. Egyptians could not see each other, yet the Israelites had light in their homes. Driven to the edge of madness, but still proud, Pharaoh summoned Moses one last time at the end of chapter 10. He ordered Moses away, warning, "Don't ever see my face again, or you shall die." Moses simply agreed, saying he had spoken well. He would never see Pharaoh again, for the final terror was at the door. As the 3 days of darkness lifted, a new, final shadow prepared to fall. Moving into chapter 11 of Exodus, the clash between human pride and divine authority reached its breaking point. God told Moses he would bring one last plague upon Egypt. Afterward, God promised Pharaoh would not just let the Israelites go. He would drive them out completely. Moses stood before Pharaoh and delivered the chilling final warning. At midnight, every firstborn in Egypt would die, from the firstborn of the king on his throne to the firstborn of the slave at her mill. A loud wailing would echo throughout the land. But among the Israelites, not even a dog would bark, showing the Lord makes a clear distinction between the two nations. Burning with righteous anger, Moses left Pharaoh's presence forever. In chapter 12, the narrative slows down deliberately. Before the final judgment, God gave Israel specific instructions to secure their salvation. It was more than escaping slavery. It was the birth of a nation. God reset their calendar, making this the first month of their year. Every family had to choose a year-old male lamb without defect. They cared for the animal until the 14th day, and at sunset, the assembly of Israel slaughtered their lambs. The blood was painted on the sides and tops of their doorframes. God declared he would pass through Egypt that night to strike every firstborn and judge all the gods of Egypt. But where he saw the blood, he would pass over that house. This is the foundational anchor for the biblical message of grace. Salvation from judgment was not earned by moral perfection or by birthright, but solely by sheltering under the blood of an innocent substitute. Inside their homes, the Israelites ate roasted meat in haste, with bitter herbs, and bread without yeast. They were dressed for travel cloaks, tucked in sandals on, and staffs in hand. It was the Lord's Passover. At midnight, the unthinkable happened. The Lord struck every firstborn in Egypt. The text paints a grim scene. Pharaoh rose in the night with all his officials and all the Egyptians, and a loud wail rose across the nation, for there was not a single house without someone dead, shattered and defeated. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron in the dark. He surrendered, crying out, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you asked. Take your flocks and herds and go, and bless me." The Egyptians urgently pressed them to leave, fearing they would all die if the Hebrews stayed longer. The Israelites marched out with their dough, asking for silver, gold, and clothing, effectively plundering their oppressors without raising a single sword. They left as a massive multitude of 600,000 men, plus women, children, and many others. The text proudly records that exactly 430 years of living in Egypt ended on that day. In chapter 13, God moved to establish a permanent memorial. He commanded Moses to consecrate every firstborn male to him, a living reminder that their lives were bought with a price. They were to eat unleavened bread for 7 days yearly, to remember the haste of their rescue. As the departure began, the text reveals God's tender providence. He did not lead them toward the Philistine territory, knowing that the trauma of war might cause the terrified former slaves to flee back to Egypt. Instead, God led them toward the Red Sea. Moses also took the bones of Joseph, fulfilling a solemn oath made centuries earlier. The chapter closes with a stunning visual of divine comfort and protection. The Lord himself leads them forward, a towering pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. He offers light, ensuring this new nation is never alone. But their sudden freedom faces a violent threat. In Exodus chapter 14, Pharaoh realizes his entire workforce has just vanished. A dangerous mix of pride and regret grips him. God then tells Moses to lead the Israelites to camp by the sea, in a spot where they look completely trapped by the terrain. This strategy is meant to draw Pharaoh out for one final showdown. Hearing they are wandering in confusion, the Egyptian king flips. He rallies his elite military, loads up every chariot, and ruthlessly hunts the escaping slaves. Pharaoh catches them by the sea. When the people see the terrifying might of the Egyptian war machine, panic takes over. Penned between the deep waters of the Red Sea and the deadly chariots of their former masters, they scream to God in terror and turn their rage on Moses. They mock him, asking if there weren't enough graves in Egypt that he had to drag them out to die in this wasteland. Moses stands firm. He tells them not to fear, to stay steady, and watch the rescue the Lord brings today. He promises they will never see these Egyptians again. The Lord will fight for them. They only need to be still. Then the miracle begins. The pillar of cloud shifts, standing between Egypt and Israel, bringing darkness to the enemy and light to the people, holding the army back all night long. God tells Moses to raise his staff over the sea. He does, and the Lord drives the water back with a fierce east wind, turning the seabed into dry land. The waters split, standing like walls on either side, allowing the massive crowd of Israelites to march safely through the heart of the sea. This event is not just some natural tide, but a terrifying, miraculous suspension of nature by the Creator himself. demonstrating his absolute authority to save his people. By morning, the reckless Egyptians rush headlong into the dry seabed to pursue them, but God throws their army into chaos, jamming their chariot wheels. As the last of the people reach the shore, God tells Moses to stretch his hand out again. The waters crash back down on Pharaoh's entire army. The text confirms with finality, not one survived. That day, the Israelites see the Lord's great power against Egypt, and they fear him, trusting both the Lord and his servant Moses. Moving into chapter 15, their response to this salvation is pure worship. Moses and the people erupt into a triumphant song, the first recorded song of worship in the Bible. They sing of the Lord the warrior who hurled horse and rider into the sea. They praise his unfailing love, his holy majesty, and his awesome strength. Miriam and the women dance with tambourines, echoing the victory. The empire is broken, the chains are gone, and the people are free. The story shifts from a terrifying escape to a profound celebration. The shores of the Red Sea become a place of worship, marking the birth of a redeemed nation. Yet the songs of victory soon fade as the harsh desert sun tests the faith of the people. As the journey reaches Exodus 16, the Israelites leave Elim and enter the desolate desert of Sin. Exactly 1 month after leaving Egypt, the adrenaline of the miracle wears off, and their food supplies vanish. Hungry and desperate, the whole community starts to bitterly grumble against Moses and Aaron. In a warped memory, they look back at their slavery with nostalgia, claiming they ate all the meat they wanted in Egypt. They accuse Moses of bringing them into the desert just to starve. Instead of punishing their ingratitude, God responds with overwhelming grace. He promises to rain down bread from heaven. That evening, massive flocks of quail cover the camp. By morning, a delicate, flaky substance blankets the ground like frost. They ask, "What is it?" which in Hebrew sounds like manna. Moses says, "This is the bread the Lord provides." God tells them to gather only what they need for the day, teaching them a rhythm of daily dependence. But on the 6th day, they gather a double portion so they can rest for the Sabbath. Moving into chapter 17, they camp at Rephidim, but there is absolutely no water to drink. Thirst triggers panic again, and the people quarrel violently with Moses. They demand water, questioning if the Lord is truly among them. Moses cries out to God, fearing the angry mob is ready to stone him. God tells Moses to take the elders, step ahead of the people, and strike the rock at Horeb with your staff. As Moses hits the stone, water gushes out. This brings life to the massive crowd and their livestock. This pattern of complaining and divine provision exposes the deep scars of slavery. The Israelites are physically free, but their minds are still stuck in the survival mode of Egypt. They expect a master who only exploits them. The wilderness isn't meant to torture them, but to serve as intensive training. It strips away their reliance on earthly masters and teaches them to trust the daily, faithful provision of an invisible God. Right after this crisis, the nation faces its first military threat. The Amalekites launch a cowardly, unprovoked attack at Rephidim. Moses sends Joshua to lead the fighting men, while Moses himself climbs a nearby hill. He raises the staff of God high. As long as Moses keeps his hands up, Israel wins the battle. But when exhaustion sets in and his hands drop, the Amalekites gain ground. Aaron and Hur bring a stone for Moses and hold his arms steady until sunset. This secures a total victory. The story then shifts in chapter 18 to a crucial moment of civil organization. Moses' father-in-law Jethro, a Midianite priest, hears what God has done and visits the camp, bringing Moses' wife and 2 sons. The next day, Jethro watches as Moses sits from morning till night, exhausted. He is personally judging every dispute for hundreds of thousands of people. Jethro warns Moses that this pace is impossible to keep up. He will wear himself out, and the people too. Jethro advises him to appoint capable, God-fearing men as leaders over groups of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens to handle simple cases, bringing only the hard matters to Moses. Moses humbly listens to this wisdom. He delegates the authority, creating a functional, decentralized judicial structure for the massive camp. With their stomachs full, their thirst quenched, enemies defeated, and new leadership in place, the camp is finally ready for the most important encounter of their existence. Refreshed and organized, the nation packs their tents and marches toward the mountain, where a burning bush once spoke to a shepherd. In chapter 19, 3 months after leaving Egypt, the Israelites arrive at Sinai and camp before the towering mountain. The mood shifts from physical survival to a profound moment of divine encounter. Moses goes up the mountain, and God gives him a message. He reminds them of how he carried them on eagle's wings out of Egypt, then offers a stunning proposal. If they obey his voice and keep his covenant, they will be his treasured possession, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The elders agree. For the people, God orders them to prepare for 2 days and wash their clothes. On the 3rd day, the Lord will appear to the assembly. Strict boundaries are set around the mountain. Anyone who touches the base will be put to death. On the morning of the 3rd day, the display is terrifying. A thick cloud covers the peak with violent thunder, lightning, and a deafening trumpet blast. Mount Sinai is wrapped in smoke because the Lord descends in fire. The smoke billows like a furnace. The mountain trembles, and the ram's horn grows louder and louder. Moses leads the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stand trembling at the foot of the mountain. Out of this terrifying majesty, moving into chapter 20, God speaks to the nation. He begins by declaring his identity. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, the land of slavery. Then he delivers the 10 Commandments. This is crucial for understanding biblical law. The 10 Commandments are not a list of arbitrary rules to earn salvation. They are the terms of a relationship for a people already saved. Like wedding vows, these laws, which forbid idolatry, murder, theft, and adultery, show how Israel should live in a loving, faithful covenant with the God who rescued them. But the sheer terror of hearing God's voice from the fire is too much. They step back and beg Moses to speak for them, fearing that if God keeps speaking, they will die. Moses reassures them that God has come to test them, so that the fear of God will keep them from sin. The people stay at a distance while Moses approaches the thick darkness where God is. From chapter 21 to 23, the narrative pauses the drama to establish the Book of the Covenant. God gives Moses a series of practical, civil, and ceremonial laws. These laws apply the 10 Commandments to the everyday reality of the ancient Near East, covering everything from the treatment of servants and property rights to justice for the vulnerable, like the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan. It is a blueprint for how this new nation is to reflect God's justice and holiness in their daily lives. Chapter 24. The covenant is officially ratified in a deeply symbolic ceremony. Moses tells the people all the words and laws of the Lord. The people answer with one voice, promising to obey everything the Lord commanded. Moses writes it all down, builds an altar at the mountain's base, and offers young bulls as fellowship sacrifices. He splashes half the blood on the altar representing God. After reading the Book of the Covenant and receiving the people's agreement, he splashes the remaining blood on them. He declares it the blood of the covenant the Lord made with them. This ritual binds both sides in a solemn life-or-death pact. In the ancient world, blood meant life. By sharing this between the altar and the people, God and Israel are formally joined. They become one in a sacred, unbreakable family bond. To seal this moment, Moses, Aaron, and 70 elders climb the mountain. In a serene contrast to the earlier fire, they actually see the God of Israel. Under his feet is a pavement like lapis lazuli blue as the sky. God does not strike these leaders down. Instead, they share a peaceful covenant meal in his presence. Afterward, God calls Moses higher to receive stone tablets. Moses leaves Joshua behind and enters the cloud, staying there 40 days and 40 nights. Inside that thick, blazing cloud, God reveals his ultimate desire. He doesn't want to rule from a distance. He wants to live right in the center of their camp. Chapter 25 of Exodus shifts from the thunder of the covenant ceremony to an incredibly detailed architectural blueprint. God tells Moses to ask the Israelites for an offering: gold, silver, bronze, fine linens, and acacia wood from anyone whose heart prompts them to give. Then God declares the breathtaking purpose for this wealth. Have them make a sanctuary so I can dwell among them. Moses receives the exact pattern for a sacred tent known as the tabernacle and all its furnishings. The text zooms in on the most sacred object first, the Ark of the Covenant, a wooden chest overlaid with pure gold, built to hold the stone tablets. It features a mercy seat and 2 golden cherubim with wings outstretched. This is God's throne on earth. Instructions then move to a golden table for the bread and a solid gold lampstand, or menorah, shaped like a blooming almond tree. The text meticulously describes the tent's construction in chapter 26, including layers of curtains and wooden frames. It details a thick, embroidered veil that serves as a strict boundary between the holy place and the most holy place, where the ark rests. In chapter 27, God outlines the bronze altar for sacrifices to be placed in the courtyard. This ensures the people know that approaching a holy God always requires a substitute. This long, descriptive section isn't just an ancient manual. It is a theological map for restoring Eden. The lampstand's floral designs, the cherubim guarding the presence, and the abundance of gold all mirror the paradise where God and humans once coexisted. The tabernacle teaches that God isn't distant. His goal in saving Israel was to move into their neighborhood, recreating a pocket of Eden right in the middle of a barren, unforgiving desert. Moving through chapters 28 and 29, the focus shifts to the people working inside the tent. God ordains Aaron and his sons to serve as priests, acting as mediators. The text describes their sacred garments in vivid detail, including a breastpiece with 12 precious stones. These represent the 12 tribes of Israel, meaning the high priest carries the people near his heart whenever he enters God's presence. God also mandates daily worship. In chapter 30, he commands a golden incense altar where smoke rises continuously, symbolizing the people's prayers ascending to the divine. He tells Moses to build a bronze basin for the priests to wash, emphasizing that absolute purity is required to stand before the Almighty. Every peg, every curtain, and every loop has a divine purpose, bridging the infinite gap between heaven and earth. Reaching chapter 31, God concludes these instructions by doing something remarkable. He personally fills 2 craftsmen, Bezalel and Oholiab, with his spirit. He gives them the specific skill and knowledge to physically execute this heavenly design. The 40-day meeting on the mountain ends with God handing Moses the ultimate treasure, 2 stone tablets of the law, inscribed by the very finger of God. But while Moses receives the blueprints of heaven above, a catastrophic betrayal is brewing down in the valley. Entering chapter 32, the narrative shifts back to the Israelite camp. Moses has been gone nearly 40 days. The people are panicking, feeling abandoned in the wilderness. They gather around Aaron and demand he make gods to lead them, claiming they don't know what happened to that fellow Moses. In a shocking failure of leadership, Aaron immediately caves to the frightened mob. He collects their gold earrings. He melts the metal and casts it into a golden calf. The people stare at the statue and shout, "Israel, these are the gods who brought you out of Egypt." Aaron builds an altar before the calf and declares a festival for the Lord. By the next morning, the camp erupts into wild partying and pagan sacrifices. This calf wasn't a total rejection of Yahweh, but a forbidden pagan way to worship him. Having lived in Egypt for centuries, the Israelites were terrified by the invisible, uncontrollable nature of the God on the mountain. They wanted a physical, manageable symbol of divine power to calm their anxiety. They were directly and immediately violating the second commandment they had sworn to obey just days earlier. High above the chaos, God sees it all. He tells Moses to hurry down, coldly calling them your people instead of his own. His anger burns against their sudden rebellion, and he offers to destroy the nation and start a fresh covenant through Moses alone. But Moses steps into the gap as the ultimate mediator. He pleads with God, appealing not to Israel's goodness, because they had none, but to God's own reputation among the Egyptians and his ancient promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Lord relents and spares the camp. Moses turns and heads down the mountain, carrying the 2 tablets. When he finally reaches the camp and sees the calf and the wild dancing, his anger explodes. He slams the stone tablets to the ground, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. This breaking of the stones shows that the spiritual covenant has been shattered by the people. Moses burns the golden calf, grinds it into dust, sprinkles it on the water, and forces the Israelites to drink it. He calls for whoever is on the Lord's side to join him. The tribe of Levi rallies to Moses, and they sweep through the camp, executing the leaders of the rebellion. The day ends in absolute tragedy. The crisis deepens as we move into chapter 33. God tells Moses to resume the journey to the promised land, but delivers a crushing blow. He will not go with them himself. He promises an angel to drive out their enemies, but says his presence won't stay, because they are a stubborn people and he might destroy them. When the people hear this terrible news, they go into deep mourning. Moses realizes that the promised land means nothing without the presence of the promiser. He sets up a tent outside the camp and pleads with God face to face. He insists, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here." He knows God's presence is what separates Israel from every other nation. Moved by Moses' desperate, faithful prayer, God agrees to go with them. Seeking ultimate reassurance after the close call, Moses makes a bold request. "Now show me your glory." In chapter 34, God tells Moses to carve 2 new tablets. In the quiet morning, the Lord descends in the cloud, stands with Moses, and passes by. As he passes, God speaks his own name and character to the mediator. When God declares who he is, he doesn't lead with power or wrath. Instead, he reveals himself as compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in love and faithfulness, forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. This revelation becomes the most quoted description of God in the entire Bible. It proves to the audience that the survival of the relationship between God and Israel relies entirely on God's astonishing mercy, not on human perfection. Overwhelmed by this beautiful, heavy revelation, Moses bows to the ground and worships. The Lord officially renews the broken covenant, rewriting the 10 Commandments on the new stones. When Moses finally comes down the mountain, his face is literally radiating brilliant light from speaking directly with the Lord. The crisis has passed. Grace has triumphed over rebellion, and the covenant is secure once again. With the relationship restored and the plans in hand, the people turn their energy toward building a home for their holy God. As we enter chapter 35 of Exodus, Moses gathers the community. But before a single thread is woven, he gives them a strict reminder to observe the Sabbath rest. This firmly establishes that the work of building God's house must never become more important than the worship of God himself. After this, Moses calls for materials, asking for an offering from everyone whose heart prompts them to give. The response is staggering. Men and women come forward with jewelry, silver, bronze, colorful yarn, fine linen, and wood. In a beautiful reversal of the golden calf disaster, where gold was surrendered out of panic to build a false idol, the Israelites now give their wealth freely out of love. They bring so much material that the master craftsmen have to stop their work to complain to Moses. They tell him, "The people are bringing far more than we need." Moses has to issue an official order to stop the flood of generosity. Through chapters 36 to 39, the narrative focuses on the meticulous physical construction of the tabernacle. Led by Bezalel and Aholiab, workers weave massive curtains, coat frames in pure gold, build the bronze altar, and fashion the Ark of the Covenant. The text repeats almost every architectural detail previously outlined in the blueprint chapters. This massive repetition is not a writing mistake or a lack of creativity. It is a powerful theological statement. After the disastrous rebellion at the mountain, where the people tried to worship on their own terms, they show absolute meticulous obedience. The phrase, "just as the Lord commanded Moses," repeats like a steady rhythmic drumbeat, proving that true worship follows God's design, not human imagination. As the work nears completion in chapter 39, the craftsmen finish the sacred priestly garments, including the stunning breastpiece, embedded with 12 precious stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. They bring the entire dismantled tabernacle to Moses for a final inspection. Moses looks over the tent, the furnishings, and the garments, verifying that they completed the work exactly as the Lord commanded. Seeing their faithful, painstaking obedience, Moses blesses the people. The grand finale arrives as the narrative reaches chapter 40. The Lord speaks to Moses, commanding him to officially set up the tabernacle on the first day of the first month. This date is significant. It marks exactly 1 year since the frantic, terrifying night they escaped Egypt. Moses carefully erects the tent, places the Ark of the Covenant behind the heavy veil, arranges the golden table, lights the magnificent menorah, and sets up the courtyard. He anoints everything with sacred oil, officially transforming these ordinary earthly materials into holy objects dedicated to heaven. When Moses finally finishes all the work, the ultimate payoff of the entire Exodus journey occurs. The thick, majestic cloud covers the tent of meeting, and the blazing glory of the Lord completely fills the tabernacle. The divine presence is so overwhelmingly dense and holy that even Moses, the great mediator who spoke with God face to face, cannot step inside. This is the moment the entire book has been driving toward. From the muddy, blood-stained brickyards of Egyptian slavery, through the terrifying plagues across the dry floor of the Red Sea, and past the fiery thunder of Mount Sinai, God's true intention is realized. The narrative concludes with a stunning, permanent visual of grace. The cloud of the Lord rests over the tabernacle by day, and fire glows within it by night, visible to the entire nation of Israel throughout all their travels. The massive gap between a holy God and a broken people has been bridged. The book of Exodus ends not with a march, but with the breathtaking reality of God and humanity reconciled, living together in the wilderness. So we reach the end of our incredible journey through the book of Exodus. If you have made it this far, I want to invite you to mark this moment of learning and reflection. Comment below not just for the YouTube algorithm, but as a sincere testimony of what God has spoken to your heart today. Write this: I understood the message of Exodus. My story can also be aligned with God. That comment is more than a sentence. It is a declaration from someone who knows their life is not disconnected from God's master plan. Your choices matter. Your personal history can glorify the Lord. And I have to ask, what spoke to you most throughout this book? Was it God's silent providence when Moses was a baby? The undeniable power of the plagues, the perfect grace of the Passover lamb, the miracle of the Red Sea crossing, or the breathtaking reality of the tabernacle, showing that a holy God wants to live among His people? Which area of your life needs to be delivered or reorganized right now in light of this teaching? Share it in the comments. When you testify, you strengthen your own faith and encourage others to stand firm. I pray that this journey through Exodus does not end here, simply as another video you watched online, but that it becomes a true milestone of spiritual alignment. May you learn to look at your own history through God's eyes. May you realize that the God who leads people out of slavery is still working today to lead you into freedom. May your home, your faith, your decisions, and your relationships be firmly established in the Lord. And if you are watching this and do not yet know God personally, this is your moment. Do not put this off. The same God who heard the Israelites is listening to your heart right now. Acknowledge that you need Him. Believe that He controls history and that Jesus Christ is the ultimate Passover lamb who sacrificed Himself to set you free from the slavery of sin. Surrender your life to the Lord today. Say it right now from the bottom of your heart. God, I trust my history into your hands. May the Lord bless you, keep you, give you clear discernment, and lead you in His truth. I will see you in the next video, God willing.